So apparently there's no Venom without a Spider-Man being close by. As such, in the year 2099, we have Miguel O'Hara as the Spider-Man for that era. And as his complementary villain, we have Venom 2099. As expected, this version of Venom has its own unique characteristics, which we will cover much later in the video. But first, we must mention that this version of Venom is known as Kron Stone. In this video, we'll discuss what happened to Venom 2099 after 100 years of hating Spider-Man. So let's start at the beginning of this story with the era's own version of the Punisher. You might really want to know how the Punisher got into the mix, so stick around. This could get interesting. By now, we're all familiar with the Punisher story arc, and the version set in the distant year of 2099 is no different except for a few variations. The bad guy who kills his family is not from the Mafia, nor is he a lowlife from the streets of Hell's Kitchen. He's actually known as Kron, and he is some kind of psychopath who targets happy families. He simply can't stand the sight of them, and where else to meet such families than at the amusement park or zoo? So the first few panels we see have Kron and his loyal group of operatives terrorizing families who are paying a visit to the zoo. One of such families is that of Jake Gallows. His mother, brother, and sister-in-law are taking a leisurely stroll through the zoo and generally having a good time. Jake catches up with them and their conversation resumes. At this point, you might have figured out that Jake Gallows might not have a family of his own and is only leeching off his brother's family, more or less. Jake is also a private security contractor, and you do well to remember that. Suddenly, Kron picks that very moment to strike and jumps right in front of Jake and the others. Kron shoots Jake's brother first with a microwave gun. I bet you didn't know such a type of gun existed. Kron then shoots Jake next and barely incapacitates him. Then Kron moves on to their mother and finally tops off his madness by shooting Jake's sister-in-law too. Jake is so devastated that he asks Kron to kill him too. No one should be made to endure such a loss, but Kron ignores him and would rather have him suffer the pain of losing his loved ones, or, as Kron prefers to put it, his family. Jake survives his wounds and swears revenge, and so he officially becomes the Punisher of the 2099 era. His main quest is finding Kron so as to make him pay, and for someone so determined, he gets his chance to face Kron again. Kron is at an amusement park, threatening to shut down the anti-gravity pavilion with children still floating in midair. For you parents out there, that could mean a lot of broken bones and perhaps 1 or 2 fatalities under the right conditions. As such, the Punisher has a dilemma on his hands. Should he save the children or go after Kron? Kron eventually escaped. The next time around, Kron isn't so lucky. Jake camouflages himself with some future invisibility technology. And once Kron shows up close to an alley, Jake makes his move and knocks Kron to the ground. He then pulls out a pistol and shoots at Kron, but Kron has some invisible armor around him, and all the bullets ricocheted. But the gunshots were forceful enough to make Kron want to catch his breath, but then the Punisher pulled one over on Kron. He produced an ancient weapon, and it was a knife. We suppose that by 2099, the knife will become a relic, but this knife turns out to be the only effective weapon to be used against Kron's armor. And so the Punisher pushes it into Kron's chest. The story continues with Miguel O'Hara juggling between 2 girls named Xena Kwan and Dana D'Angelo. Dana used to date Miguel's younger brother until she cheated on him, so even in the future, relationships will still be complicated. You'd have thought someone would have figured the heck out of that long before then. Anyway, the connection between Kron Stone and Miguel is this: they both have the same father, Tyler Stone. At this point, Miguel doesn't know about his relationship with Tyler, who is supposed to be an industry tycoon of some sort. Tyler gets attacked at his home and is hospitalized, so a bunch of street criminals think they can score it big now that nobody's home. But before they make their move, a symbiote-like thing emerges from the sewers. It's Kron's version of Venom, and after it dispatches the ambitious criminals, it finds its way to the hospital through the water ducts. Once it gets there, Miguel is unbeknowingly paying a visit to Tyler Stone on Dana's behalf. Then, Kron materializes from the sink and gives a speech about how all his enemies just so happen to be in the same room. We get to see the full look of Kron Stone, who is supposed to be the Venom of 2099. He drips acid and has his skull exposed. All in all, his look is way creepier than the regular Venom we know, and unlike the original Venom of our time, Kron is able to travel like slime through pipes and such. Miguel tries to throw a punch but gets burned by Kron's acidic exterior, so he runs out of the room to get changed into Spider-Man. As Kron proceeds to end Tyler Stone's life and smash him to bits, Spider-Man appears in the nick of time and takes Kron's attention away. Kron attacks Spider-Man and they crash out of the window of the high-rise. Spider-Man extricates himself from the grapple as Kron falls all the way down, making a loud splat. But that is certainly not the end of him. He takes his form again and pursues Spider-Man. Then he changes plans and attacks an office building with people in it. This forces Spider-Man's hand as he tries to rescue the people, but Kron tosses him out of the window. Spider-Man barely survives his fall by cushioning himself with a web balloon. Then the troopers show up, but Kron kills them too. Miguel gets home that evening and finds both Dana and Xena being held captive by Kron's version of Venom. Kron asks Miguel to choose which of his girlfriends to save and which should be the first to die. Miguel doesn't think but simply blurts out Xena's name under pressure, so Kron starts to acidify the tentacles around Dana. You can tell she's in great pain as yellow smoke oozes from around her. Miguel seizes that moment to slash off some of the tentacles, and he frees Dana from Kron's clutches. He takes her to an emergency elevator and asks her to slide all the way down. Then Miguel returns for Xena, but Kron has carted her away. Kron also intercepts Dana as she gets to the ground floor. He has successfully outdone Miguel in the brains department in this regard. Rather than face off with Miguel, he has chosen to keep his advantage by securing both of the hostages. Miguel simply didn't see that coming, so Kron gets them in a car and makes Dana and Xena drive away. They are on the freeway now, but the police are on their tails. There's a helicopter hovering above, and Kron attacks it. At some point, the car accidentally swerves off the road and starts to plummet into the cliff below, but Miguel saves his two girlfriends from crashing with some webbing. By now, Kron is done with the police and returns to carry both Dana and Xena away. He knocks Miguel out of the way and runs. The police follow closely behind and corner Kron in an alley. Then they start shooting, but the bullets simply pass through Kron's body. He scorns them as he eventually reveals where all those bullets ended up. Dana was standing just behind him and received the brunt of all that gunfire. Miguel and Xena rush to her side, but it's too late. Dana says her last few words before she gives up the ghost. Here's what she said to Spider-Man. "I'm happy you shaved as I asked you because when we kissed it tickled." Okay, that's sweet of her. We didn't expect that. By now, Kron is in the wind, and Spider-Man or Miguel is so angry that he swears to avenge Dana's death, whatever it takes. So he throws himself into studying the symbiote thing. He has been able to acquire a sample of it from when he cut it off of Dana, but during testing, he is constantly met with a brick wall. In his frustration, he screams out loud, and suddenly the symbiote sample flinches. It's a no-brainer after all. The symbiote reacts negatively to sharp sounds. You can sense Miguel going, "Booyah!" Downtown, Kron is preparing to make his move on the unsuspecting populace when he hears a screeching sound. As anticipated, it drives him crazy. Spider-Man then swoops in to finish him off. He lands punch after punch with all the enhanced spider strength he has. The sound continues to ruin Kron's day, and he can't do anything else, not even shapeshift or take to his heels. The screeching sound paralyzes him, and Spider-Man is happy to take advantage of this. Kron begs that the sound be turned off as the symbiote melts away from an unidentified host. Spider-Man continues his onslaught irrespective of the pleas of mercy. Eventually, the symbiote melts away completely and reveals the host underneath. It just so happens to be the human form of Kron. Spider-Man is somewhat surprised by this. We also share the same sentiment because the Punisher stabbed him to death at the beginning of the story. So where did he come from? Perhaps the symbiote found his lifeless form lying there on the street and was able to revitalize him. That's a question for another day. But Spider-Man goes on to nab Kron and put him away in a containment unit. Back at the lab, Spider-Man isn't satisfied with Kron living out the rest of his sentence in a suspended state, and so challenges him to a duel without the symbiote present. Mind you, Spider-Man is fighting as Miguel without his secret identity, so Kron underrates him as simply a paper-pushing scientist. Nonetheless, he gets the beating of his lifetime from Miguel. So apparently we called it. After the Punisher stabbed Kron, he ended up in the sewer system and was met by the symbiote, who took advantage of an available host as represented by Kron. And so the story comes full circle, and the rest is history. The end.